Hi, welcome to Ordinary People. If you're new to the podcast, welcome, especially. If you've been enjoying these, it'd be really good if you could let us know, or if you have any comments, any suggestions, any complaints. Maybe the complaints could go into the special bin, but if you get any comments, that'd be great. um, and if you want to do that, if you want to just say, let us know anything about our podcast that we are missing, just head over to the website. It's ordinarypodcast.com. And also, if you feel like sharing with your friends and just letting people know that this exists, don't keep it to yourself. So please do that. Um, Great to have Andrew back.
Evening.
And Neil is going to introduce our guest. So Neil, over to you.
Good stuff. Thanks, Paul. Good to be back on with you again, and Andrew. A real joy for me to be able to introduce our guest tonight. Just off air, we're talking about how we're all aware, familiar with each other by reputation, and so it's good to be able to have a chance to sit down and chat with Pete Kernoghan. And there's many strings to Pete's bow, but there's one particular area that we're going to focus in on tonight. But just before we do that, Pete, thanks for joining us. Thanks for being here tonight. And why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a wee bit about who you are, a bit about family, where you're from, and anything else you want to add in.
All right. Hello, welcome. Hi. This is great. My name's Pete Kernoghan. I have just turned 40, so on Saturday. So I am just oozing wisdom all the time now since turning 40. It's unbelievable. Can't believe it. I'm married to Lisa Kernoghan now, formerly Emerson. So if you're Mid-Ulster Mafia, you know that Emerson Emmanuel Church in Lurgan. So Lisa and we have two kids. So we have Poppy, who's 11, and she goes to Lagan College here in Belfast. And we have Leo, who is 7. He just turned 7 on Sunday. So our birthdays are right beside each other. So he is currently running around outside, torturing our dog, Baxter. And Baxter's like a bear. So she's like a puppy and mental. So we live in the heart of East Belfast, but that's not the heart. It's pure gentrified suburb. So it's just off of Castlereagh Road near Orangefield Park. Yeah, we go to Emmanuel Church in Lurgan. And yeah, so I'm a Man United fan.
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
We never even got chatting about what football team.
I've got my shirt and all on underneath here, my 1992 original bad boy.
I remember. Do you know why I remember that top, Pete? Because those were I'm a Leeds fan, and so that brings me back to our glory days. The last time Leeds won the league was 91-92 when Man U were probably playing in that very top.
That's right.
Anyway,
and then you sold us Cantona and everything changed.
That's back when I remember. That's when I was pretending to like football to fit in.
Andrew, I'm stunned here. Andrew has got involved in a football conversation. I need a moment here. I can't believe it.
1992 to 1996. That's my.
I feel like I need to go here. You've brought up Cantona, Pete, and the only game I've ever went to see Leeds play was whenever they beat Chelsea 3-0, and Eric Cantona scored the third in a 3-0 victory at Ellen Road, and that season ended and sold to Man U for $1 million. It was painful. You're bringing up.
Never look back. I would never look back.
Already painful memories have been brought up at the start of this conversation, Pete. Where
great. I like to start there.
We need to rescue it. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that, Pete. Yeah, we're incredibly good friends of the Mid-Ulster Mafia.
The Mid-Ulster Mafia, yeah, the Emerson clan. Like it's brilliant. It is a great tool. Like when I talk to anyone in and around that area, I go, "Oh, do you know any of the Emersons?" You know, because obviously my name is different. And they're like, "Oh yeah," and I'm like, "Oh well, I'm Philip Emerson's son-in-law." and that changes the whole dynamic of the conversation. You know, you're getting money off and things, and it's amazing. And there's like a secret handshake. Do you know about it? No,
Really?
there's not. I'm only joking.
Yeah, so they're incredibly good friends of ours. So that's where we there's a slight connection between us. So that's good. Pete, you do incredible work with an organisation called No More Traffic, and this whole conversation around modern slavery and human trafficking it's a really heavy one. It's one I think that we, for whatever reason, we almost try to avoid it. We try to ignore it, suppress it. I think we can be really guilty of that. But I would love you just to talk a wee bit around where, how, why your involvement in that came about.
Sure. So No More Traffic started in 2011, and started. So our go ahead. Sorry. Oh, got a wee bit of
I think I was
feedback.
just
So it's just myself talking to myself inside my head. Yeah, 2011 it started, and the kind of precursor to that was in 2008, 2009. I was in Patti in Thailand, and came across sex trafficking for the first time in the kind of rawest form that you could really ever see. I was there as part of a church kind of outreach worship program thing, and I was kind of young and kind of sheltered, and like just I'd never seen kind of anything like that before, and completely broke myself and my best friend Aaron Boyd's heart. And we kind of wrote a song out there, ended up going massive in America and all that stuff, and that's a whole different conversation. But off the back of that, we started a charity called Stand Out International that raised money for 29 small projects in Cambodia that rescue kids for child sex exploitation. But it also the 29 projects were ranging from prevention and preventative stuff right the way to rehabilitative stuff. So the full kind of spectrum of that, and that was facilitated by an organization called Viva Networks, and on the ground in Cambodia, Chad Dai were the organization that we had partnership with. And I say that because Chad Dai are quite a heavy influence on what No More Traffic has evolved into. And then so I was kind of going back and forward to Cambodia and involved in those conversations, and becoming more and more kind of aware and educated around the global issue of human trafficking and modern slavery, with a kind of Southeast Asia focus. And as the conversation rolls, you become more and more aware of what's happening, and more in the conversation of what's happening at home. And at this point in time, around 2010, into 2010, started 2011, there wasn't too much of an NGO presence really here in Northern Ireland doing anything around modern slavery or human trafficking. There was a few people that were kind of having the conversation. And then one evening, actually, two of my friends came to the house to talk about something completely different. And we ended up talking about modern slavery, human trafficking stuff. And they were kind of the same moment I had in Pattaya, where they were just kind of completely like, right, we need to do something about this. And the next day they came back and they were like, well, let's do something. Let's raise awareness. Let's do a couple of events. So I was like, okay, this is like November time. And they were like, we're thinking about May. And I was thinking about May the next year. I was thinking like 18 months down the line or something. But they were like, nah, let's go May, right? So I was like, okay. And so started off do one or two events. It ended up turning into a week long of events with, I think there was 42 events and 24 partner organizations involved, ranging from Women's Aid to the PSNI, the Department of Justice. And that was the kind of, we were like, okay, well, we just started off trying to plan some events to raise some awareness. And there's obviously a conversation and heart yearning for this. So then we kind of formed more formal in a kind of charity sense and registered with the Charities Commission in 2012. Since then, what we've kind of been doing, we're primarily based around awareness raising and frontline professional training and advocacy. So we have consulted on the first piece of updated modern slavery legislation in 200 years, which was Lord Morrow's bill. And that was the precursor to the 2015 Modern Slavery Act that is around the UK at the moment. And we help shape the strategy, modern slavery, human trafficking strategy with the Department of Justice and the other NGOs in the NGO engagement group. There's about 14 other NGOs involved in that group. So we help, so we speak into that. And then we train the PSNI recruits. So for the last 7 years, every PSNI recruit will get some modern slavery human trafficking training that is hosted by ourselves and the modern slavery human trafficking unit within the PSNI. So we share that training. And then, so we do other frontline professional training, midwives, doctors, dentists, social workers, homeless community. So that's what we kind of do. And then like some kind of public awareness stuff as well.
Very good. That's amazing, Pete. Incredible what you're doing. Just when you're on that, just really quickly, we had a girl came and did some training with us. So I don't know how much you know about the charity that we're a part of, Drop In. So we have charity shops all across Northern Ireland, and it was one of those things that a couple of years ago, me and my brother-in-law David ended up becoming aware of what was going on locally.
Mm-hmm.
This was a real need, because we'd been part of some stuff that was going on across the world, and really naive to what was going on in our own communities. And so I don't need to labour on, but I just like we brought somebody in to train our staff and what to look out for. It'd be great if you could speak into this a wee bit more, but some of the signs to be aware of. And one of the shops in particular picked up on the training that she'd received, and then was able to bring one of those needs or one of those cases to the PSNI in one of our towns. Not too far from here, so all that stuff is incredibly important. So can you talk a wee bit around
sign spotting?
Yeah.
So
the signs and stuff like that.
Yeah, so like some of the there's kind of key indicators, and the scenarios change, and what we have found with modern slavery and human trafficking is that it's very entwined in lots of different aspects of society, and the indicators for those scenarios look different, depending on where you are.
Yeah.
But there's some common indicators that are useful and good to know that, so for example, if somebody's in control of somebody else's money, for example, so we maybe see that in car wash, you hand money to a central person, or they don't have access to their own money. They're maybe under control, maybe overly fearful of the police, or overly fearful of the authorities, and they seem to be controlled by someone else. Is a huge indicator. Another one is identification. So if somebody is holding their identification, their passport, their ID, they don't have access to it, they can't come and go freely. Maybe they sleep where they work, or they live in an overcrowded living space. That's not a living space that's not appropriate for that number of people. Maybe a property. So those are kind of key indicators around a person, but in a property, maybe, it's very busy, and busy at irregular hours, a lot of coming going through the night, maybe blacked out curtains, things like that. Maybe there's a number of unrelated adults, coming and going and very present in that house, and maybe there's a good turnover of people within it. That's an indicator. And then people working long hours, maybe like a child or an adult is. Hold on, my son's in. What are you looking for, bud? Okay. Get out of here.
Must be a man.
And maybe like the relationship between the child and the adult is, this is working from home, right? This is what it is. So the relationship between the child and the adult is unclear. So you can't really identify. And then maybe a person who doesn't know their own home or work address, or doesn't know where they are, and maybe doesn't know how they came to be there, is another indicator. But those are some of the more general ones when we're kind of looking at different scenarios, like when we look at the homeless community, or we look at social work, or kids in the care system, and we're looking at different aspects, medical profession, like unexplained injuries, things like that. They change from scenario to scenario. So, but those are some of the kind of key ones.
Very good. It's really helpful, Pete. So could you speak in? So talk a wee bit. Obviously, we've said that no more traffic is founded in Northern Ireland and focused in Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
So some of what you've brought there is really important. Can you give us an idea of what's happening in Northern Ireland? Are you able to spend a bit of time just letting us know, even for those that maybe are naive to the fact that this is taking place within our communities?
Okay. It's probably useful to know what modern slavery and human trafficking is. So modern slavery is the umbrella term. So it's an umbrella term for human trafficking and forced and compulsory labor, right? So there's kind of two worlds that exist here. So when we think about modern slavery and human trafficking, we often go to sex trafficking, right? Because it's the most talked about and probably the most glamorized, and we can probably thank Liam Neeson for that, and it doesn't look like what happened in Taken. Okay, so the vast majority of modern slavery and human trafficking isn't white vans rolling up on the side of a curb and bundling somebody into the back. Yeah. That does happen, but that is the minority of what is going on. So globally, there's about 40.3 million people enslaved in the world today, and different numbers will go up to 45 million, and so the 45 million would include forced marriage. But we take the forced marriage thing out of the equation, and we look at the 40.3 million. That breaks down into different exploitation types. So forced and compulsory labor would be one form of exploitation. So that looks like big business, people in factories. So when you're thinking about the Boohoo factory in Leicester, so loads of people working in this factory, right the way down to small agricultural businesses like apple picking, mushroom picking, fisheries, things like that. Those are some key industries where forced labor would happen. But it's the full spectrum: big business to small business. Sex exploitation. So that's what it says on the tin: the exploitation of people for sex. Now, when we think about the 40.3 million, the gender split is about 75% female at that point. So in that 40.3. But when we look at sex exploitation, the gender split's off the chart. So it's about 99% female. And so, so we think about, so especially in the climate that we're in around gender equality, there is a huge gender inequality within modern slavery and human trafficking. And so it's naive for people to go, oh, the genders are equal. Not in this world. It's just not, that's just not a thing. So, Yeah, so sex exploitation, then we have domestic servitude, which is essentially live-in slaves. Very common in the kind of Arab and kind of Emirate kind of area. That's a kind of normal cultural kind of thing that goes on there, kind of accepted as a social norm, which is interesting for what we see now with more migration and things happening here, and kind of normalized cultural practices being brought to Northern Ireland. So there's the tension of that, and that doesn't mean that all of a sudden, because there's a cultural norm somewhere else, that it becomes legal here. That's not what it is. It's still illegal here. So and then we have criminal exploitation. So it's the exploitation of somebody for crime. So that's like forced begging, drug peddling. There's so many kind of instances of that. And then this is kind of really dark. So it's organ harvesting would be the last form of exploitation. So essentially the removal of people's organs in back alley surgeries, and they're sold online or sold sold on to other buyers in those surgeries. That, again, when I say organ harvesting, everybody goes like it's something over in Southeast Asia or Africa or something like that. Now, we have never had a reported case of organ harvesting here in Northern Ireland, but there have been cases in England and there have been cases in Wales. And I'm not talking 10 years ago, I'm talking last year, so yeah, it's big business. So, and that's to understand what those different forms are.
Good, thanks.
And what we're seeing in Northern Ireland, right, is we're seeing a lot of forced labor. So we're seeing a lot of stuff happen in agriculture, in factories and things like that. And what we look at for a level of measurement, it's not very accurate, but we look at a level of measurement around what's called the National Referral Mechanism. And so their statistics for the past maybe about 5-6 years has had forced labor as the number one exploitation type within Northern Ireland. This year just passed was the first time that sexual exploitation had overtaken that. But I always say that with a little side note, right? So the National Referral Mechanism is the UK-wide provision for people who have been identified as human trafficking victims and have accessed services, okay? Mm-hmm. So it's so important that we know that these numbers are the people that have exited and are accessing services. This is not representative of what the scale of the problem is. Yeah. And people then often, when they see the stats, they go, oh, well, these numbers are very low. And yes, they are low. And then if they look at them over the next, over the last 10 years, you can see them increasing. And people go, oh, well, human trafficking is on the increase and money slavery is on the increase. We actually want these numbers to increase. We want these numbers year on year to go up. The reason why is that means that people are getting rescued, that people are getting accessed and are accessing services and being identified, and frontline professionals are identifying that these people are human trafficking victims. And there's a lot of nuance and tensions within human trafficking and modern slavery, because it's not like a lot of other crimes, because it's so complex and there's so much coercion, unspoken manipulation, migration issues, violence, cultural understanding. There's so much of all of these aspects play into it and make it really hard to spot. So in a sense of what the scale of the problem is, I can't give you some numbers. I can't turn around and go, well, we estimate that it does no service to what we're trying to do here. So all I can say is that, year on year, we have identified more victims and more victims are getting access to services. That is not fully representative of the problem, though. The problem is big, ingrained, and complex within our societies, and often goes completely unseen. So and that's why doing stuff like this is important, where we become a wee bit more aware of some of the stuff that we're kind of encountering.
Yeah, wow, it's really helpful. It's so interesting, as you say, so nuanced and complex.
2 seconds. I'm just going to close my door here. 2 seconds.
So I know this is probably such a vague question, but like, what are you dreaming for when it comes to like best strategy, or what is it that you're, I suppose, what is it you're hoping for as you continue to train and raise awareness and
Yeah, it's a fair question. It's a nuance. Like, I think it's funny that the more I get into, I don't. It's not cynicism, but I think it's reality. Like the initially, my thing was, when I stood up and we launched No More Traffic, I said I wanted to see an end of slavery in my lifetime, and I still want that. But the more I'm into it, the less I believe I can see that. The less I believe that I'll see an end of slavery in my lifetime. Because the more I know, the more I see the scale, and the more I see the vast. And that's not a depressing thing. That's not a depressing thing where, well, we'll not do anything about it. Like, it's more a reality of going, right, well, this is a lot more ingrained in our society than what I maybe naively gave it credit for at the start. And it's important when, for me, this is a life posture. It's not like, this isn't a career. Like, and you, we're probably all in this. Like, if you're going for careers, charity work isn't the career, right? So that it's not a good career choice. Just so, right. So this is a life posture thing, and how to position your life in somewhere. And this is, for me, this is it. When I seen that first kid in Pattaya, I knew that this is what I'm going to give my life to. And I still believe that, and I'll still do that in whatever format that takes. At this juncture, it is in employment with No More Traffic as a development director, whatever it looks like in the future. But it will always be the posture around modern slavery and human trafficking and lifestyle, that my life towards that. And but my hope is for broader stories, right? And I think we zoom in, and we do this so all the time within the NGO sector, is that we zoom in on the key point of people's carnage, and we make all we talk about that key point. And for me, and for my hope, for the people that are entrapped in slavery, is that this moment is short and brief, and they will not be defined, and they'll not be defined by it for the rest of their lives. That's my hope. And people think, oh, well, why didn't they leave? Or, like, the brutality and the carnage that ensues within those scenarios will be with someone for the rest of their life. And what does it look like? So I care more about the other side of it, like the healing, the working through the trauma. Like, I care as much about that aftercare, about the moment after they leave, or the moment after their exploiter gets convicted 2 years down the line after the incident or whatever. It's more that I'm more hopeful and excited about, that they can flourish. It's amazing. I was talking to Helen from Chad Dye, and she tells this great story of, like, sharing the platform with somebody who had exited slavery and all that stuff, and she got a PhD. She became a researcher. She was giving talks about monastery human trafficking at academic conferences. You know, like that. That's the stuff.
Yeah.
That's where I'm aiming. I'm aiming to get people over there. And to get people there, I have to do all the stuff in this world to get them out, and in this world to help stop people going in. So yeah, that is such a vague and all over the place answer. But
well, I know it was a vague question, and I'm sort of glad that I asked it just to get that answer, because I'm so, I'm just personally just so moved by that response. That it's a life posture, not a career. It's just how you position your life. And so I find myself like that's really helpful language, because I probably find myself what looks like getting into the church world because of all these dreams and hopes that I believe that I'll see in my lifetime, but probably feeling more certain that I'll not see them.
no,
But like more confident in my life posture. Like I think that's so like just what you're sharing there is just giving me some really helpful language for probably where I feel not in the same world as you, but something similar. Yeah, I probably went the wrong way around it, but just what you've touched on some of the things that are frustrating. Is there stuff around COVID or Brexit or anything like that is actually you're finding is causing the work to be more frustrating and challenging over the last couple of years?
My work's always frustrating and challenging, because my thing is that I don't come home from work and go, I achieved that today.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't. I don't have that. I don't have that. I come home from work and people are still getting exploited. I come home and sit down and I've maybe done my emails or done a training or whatever, and people are still in carnage. And I used to have to go out and paint a wall and stuff like that. So I just had some sense of achievement, some sense of oh, I did this today, there's that section of wall that was painted, yep, achieve something, right? Like looking at my sent emails isn't, doesn't add too much value to my life, So, but in regards to COVID and Brexit, what it's done is not created frustrations; it's created new problems.
Yes.
That's the world. That's the world that modern slavery lives in. It's international organized crime, and at any point so the key points of when human trafficking surges, natural disasters. Right, so we're seeing there's a natural disaster in a place, human trafficking through the roof. Haiti, human trafficking through the roof. Why? Because uncertainty and uncomfort and things that shake societies and break structures and do all of that stuff make people vulnerable. And the key thing about exploitation is vulnerability. Vulnerability all the time. And naively, people will say it's about poverty. It's a money thing. Yes, it's a money thing for the organized crime people. But what do they use to get money? They use the exploitation of vulnerability. Whatever that vulnerability is, natural disasters, substance abuse, unaccompanied minors, immigration laws, take your pick of vulnerability, they'll exploit it. And so with Brexit, I'll speak about COVID, so lockdowns are really interesting for the modern slavery world, because what we've seen is a huge surge around online exploitation and what that looks like. So you'll see kids getting groomed and exploited and all of that stuff that's going on online. And that poses completely different problems for NGOs, frontline professionals, because a lot of these signs and indicators will always point to another individual in that person's life. So, but then put that in the digital realm, right? Put that into the digital realm. There's no one to point at. So the victim is maybe displaying the same symptoms, the same isolation, the same stuff. That's all going on, but there is no person to point this exploitation to. There's just a computer or a digital entity. And you begin to see how this then, the nuances of all and the complexity of all of this plays in. And, you know, like, I don't even want to go down the road of like internet platforms and, you know, privacy law and how that then lines up against criminal proceedings and all of this stuff, and encryption, and, you know, like, it's a whole minefield. But you see huge levels of online exploitation going on, and we've seen a huge, like, within the last year, we've seen a real pushback around online exploitation, and some big companies being exposed, and the Pornhub case is a really prime example of that. So the online stuff is crazy. Brexit poses a whole nother different kettle of fish, because it's really interesting for Northern Ireland. So Northern Ireland it has its own legislation within modern slavery, human trafficking, as well as being under the UK kind of legislation. But Northern Ireland is so interesting politically. It had positioning, geographical positioning too. I used to, like, years ago, before the whole Brexit thing, we used to talk about being the gateway to UK. So trafficking would happen through Ireland up into Northern Ireland and then into the UK because of all the open borders. Now we're the only open border between not just Ireland, but Europe. So we're the only unsecured or open border between the UK and Europe. And if we thought that Northern Ireland was a transit and destination place before Brexit, it's even more so now. And the vagueness and the uncertainty and the not knowing, is the Northern Ireland Protocol, does it apply? Like, what does stepping out of the European arrest warrant do, for all of these? Because human trafficking is an international crime, so, stepping outside the European arrest warrant, how does that play out for getting perpetrators? Well, what does it look like when we share an open border with the Republic of Ireland? And I'm not being critical, this is just fact. So there's the Republic of Ireland's response from a governmental point and legislative standpoint is shockingly poor. That's me being diplomatic. The last 3 years, there's the United States Home Office or State Department, sorry, they release a trafficking in persons report. So essentially, they set a bar, and they survey all of the countries that are a part of this group who are willing to be involved in the conversation around trafficking in persons. And they release a report every year, the TIP report, Trafficking in Persons report. And there's 4 tiers. Tier 1 being the best response, Tier 2 points for concern, and then there's the Tier 2 watch list, which is like that doesn't meet the standard to be in Tier 2, and there are serious concerns around their lack of progress. And then Tier 3, which is just really bad response. The UK and Northern Ireland are ranked in Tier 1. And the last 3 years, the Republic of Ireland been downgraded twice. So from Tier 1 to Tier 2, and now they're in the Tier 2 watch list. Other Tier 2 watch list countries are Cambodia, Bangladesh, India, and that is so. The Republic of Ireland in 2015 mirrored the 2015 Modern Slavery Act and installed their own modern slavery legislation. To date, there has not been one conviction under that legislation, not one. So if we're going to measure governmental response, you measure by prosecutions. There's not one.
My goodness.
Now that doesn't mean to say now there's brilliant work. There's some great NGO work, and there's some really sharp people who are doing amazing things around human rights, who are doing amazing things around modern slavery and human trafficking, who are in Ireland. Like the UN Special Rapporteur for modern slavery and human trafficking is Irish. So there are good people, and good stuff, and good organisations in the Republic who are doing great things. But there is a massive break between law enforcement and governmental policy and legislation that is making people vulnerable. That, no doubt in my mind, will have a direct and does have a direct impact on modern slavery and human trafficking victims in Northern Ireland. And we can point to the Essex case and say, we can categorically state that North-South divide does not apply when people are being smuggled and trafficked. Now, a note with the Essex case, that was a people smuggling case. So that was a crime against the state where people paid to get on the lorry and for safe passage, in essence.
Yeah.
But there is a huge grey area. When they get off that lorry, they are extremely vulnerable to becoming human trafficking and modern slavery victims. Right? So there's a huge grey area. So I'm not saying that was human trafficking. I'm saying that was people smuggling, but those people were very, very vulnerable. And it was obviously a tragedy that they all passed away. But if you look into the story and read the story, you will see the nuances and the connections of Northern Irish people, Republic of Ireland people working together with European organisations to traffic people. And there's an interesting report in the Irish Times where a guy who was a hauler is speaking about that, and he is like, cash is king. Cash is king. No one cares about Protestant or Catholic. No one cares about that when there's money on the table. And that's the reality of where they're at. There's big Republicans and big loyalists cashing in on exploiting people, just the way it is. When you think that there was 30 people or 30 plus people on that lorry, and they were minimum paying 10 grand each, and like this isn't like a one-off thing. Like that lorry was in a convoy with another lorry. There was another trailer that got into the UK that was attached to that trailer, and it was just happened that trailer got delayed. That got delayed, and I think it got delayed in Europe somewhere, and missed one boat, and that was how the people ended up passing away. This is happening again and again and again. So an open border, an open border that won't be policed, and don't forget the political connotations of all of that. It just makes people more vulnerable. It does. Brexit will make people more vulnerable to modern slavery. There's when we think about, right, so like the Brexit thing, you got me. So right, so we think about, right, freedom to work for European citizens. So they estimate there's going to be a 1.4 million shortfall in migrant work. Right, so 1.4 million people out of the migrant workforce. That's the shortfall. Who's going to fill that? Who's going to fill that? Right? And who's going to work? And normally these jobs are low-paid jobs that essentially nationals don't want to do. And what we have then is we have a huge gaping void in industry that needs to be filled. And the pressure will be on the industry to fill that void. And so you have all of these businesses who are getting it tight enough as it is with COVID and all of that stuff. And they need a workforce. They need a workforce. They need people who are going to go in and do this work. So all it takes is a middleman to come up and say, yeah, I'll give you a workforce. No problem. I'll give you a workforce. Just pay me directly. I'll sort it all out. No problem. And these businesses, they're so focused on trying to make their business work. Like, just make their business work, that they'll go, okay, yeah, that makes sense, right? Bang, away they go. And they're not doing their due diligence. They're not doing their kind of, looking down the line at what's going on. They're paying this money in the one bank account. And all of a sudden, this business, who maybe out of the best intention or like, well, that's kind of a sin of omission, isn't it, right? Which is just as bad as anything. But, like they're now part of this. So these people working there, not getting paid because the middleman's taking all the money, and they're there. The middleman has their passports, and this business needs a workforce. And so there's a lot of conversations. If you dig in a wee bit on some of the immigration plans by the UK government, the Home Office, there's big gaping voids that will make people vulnerable. And there's really good work happening in the UK around advocacy around that. But yeah, so those are some of the real kind of tensions and key points around COVID and Brexit.
Oh man, there's part of me I think I thought I had like a bit of an understanding of what was going on. Like I'm like, I feel like my jaws dropped to the floor, just stunned by what's going on, the implications and all the knock-on effects of all that's going on the last couple of years. Honestly, just completely stunned by all of that, Pete. So I almost want to ask you to navigate the next part of this conversation, because I honestly just I'm really grateful for it needs a certain person to be able to carry this, and you're clearly that person. With time, I know time's flying on.
No, I talk about this all day.
And you can talk about that all day, and you have, so there's just this idea of storytelling, this idea of ethical storytelling that you mentioned, and it was one of those things again that I'd heard people use before but never really touched on it. And so you mentioned it in a direct message on Twitter a couple of days ago, and I'm just so interested in hearing a bit.
Okay.
So even if you open up the conversation and see where it goes, or how far and wide we want to take it, and
the ethical storytelling is a piece that we've been around for a good number of years within No More Traffic, and really the premise of it is how do we tell a story well, and how do we empower the story, because the story is owned not by the organization and not by anybody else but the person that it happened to. So it's their story, right? And so the key dynamic in ethical storytelling is that we have to understand power balances. So if we don't understand power balances, we'll never tell stories ethically. So if we don't understand the power imbalance, even between organizations and people that they're helping, if we don't understand that power imbalance, of course there will be one there. Even if the organization says that there's not there and they don't feel like there's one there or whatever, there is one there. Because the person that they've helped has been helped by them, and they will naturally feel indebted, right? Because of the help that they've received. So if I came up to a person who my organization had helped, now we don't work directly with human trafficking victims, but hypothetically, if I came up to someone and said, can we tell your story? Let's flip that into them, and they have received this help from us. They trust us. Of course they're going to say yes. Of course they're going to say yes. So we need to understand that power imbalance, and we've got to understand that, and we've got to go, okay, I wouldn't want to tell a story that wasn't mine, right? I wouldn't have the right to that. I wouldn't want to do that. So why do organizations and NGOs specifically feel like they have the right to tell that story.
Mm-hmm.
And when we push a wee bit deeper, and this is the darkness around this world, is that they're leveraging story for charitable gain, right? So the playoff is that why do we need to tell? And we'll guise it to make ourselves feel better. Is that this is about forwarding the issue? Voices need to be heard on all of this stuff. We need to forward the issue. Blah blah blah. We need it. We need to humanize this. We need people. We need faces. We need that. We need all of this because we want to invoke this emotional reaction out of the person that reads the story, and we want to motivate them to action. What's the action? 9 times out of 10 is donate money.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it just feels like a re-victimization and a re-exploitation of people for the same reason that they were exploited in the first time. Money. And I'm being a bit callous and a bit harsh, and there's a lot more to this than just that. But that is my big thing, is that I don't have the rights to somebody's story. I don't. And it's not okay to tell that story. And I think there's such an interesting piece in this of moments in time. And you go, well, this is somebody's moment in time. And it's terrible. It is heartbreaking. It is absolutely devastating. And this moment of time will burden them for the rest of their lives. Organizations and churches or NGOs or whatever do not need to lift this piece of their story out, put it on a pedestal for everybody to look at for the rest of time while this person tries to navigate the trauma of this moment. They don't need to do that. Now, we've got to empower the voices, and I'm not saying don't tell stories, and I'm not doing all of that stuff, but the stories need to be done ethically in a way that empowers the user and the storyteller, and it doesn't rob them of their voice, and it doesn't exploit them for gain, for charitable organizational gain. And that is the key. That's the key piece in this. So there's a great, and I want to point, if this is interesting to you, go to ethicalstorytelling.com. This is, and they are by far the absolute gurus of this, so they have a pledge on there, like that you can sign as an organization, and it will give you great resources, useful tools on how to do ethical storytelling well, and that is it. And I think it's a really interesting piece, and we had a conversation last week about this, and organizations are now putting in what are called sunset clauses, and I think this is a really key thing, and that means that there's an agreement between the person and the organization that the organization will only use their story in the way that they want for a certain amount of time. And I just think there's something beautiful in that. And we're taking a moment in time and we're saying, we will talk about this with your approval and in the way that you have shaped, and your voice is being heard, and we're following your lead on this, but we will only use it for this moment of time. And after that, we will take it down off our social media, off our website, off our resources, and that's that. And I just think there's something in that, and I think there's something in that for us as NGO communities, but I think there's something really big in that for us as church communities.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm still getting my head around this. So if I can just give a couple of examples to make sure that I'm tracking with this well. So I think whenever you sent that message, I think why I reacted to this idea of ethical storytelling is because me and my wife Judith, we've been having these conversations sort of off and on over the last few months, but our youngest child is adopted. And so recently, especially listening to other adopters who have been in this journey as well, it is so easy, Pete, because I probably speak in our church most Sundays.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I think I've done and what I've witnessed a lot of other preachers do is to use their children, and then the temptation is then to use my adopted daughter's story to try and to use that as an illustration to prove my point or to cause an emotion out of, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I'm just wondering, is that like I know it's taking it off on a tangent, but so what we've committed to is not only with her, so we've committed that we are not going to tell her story. That is not, whether she's our daughter or not, it's her place to tell her story.
Yeah.
And I found 2 or 3 weeks ago on Sunday, I spoke and I used my two boys as an illustration in what I was speaking. And Judith came in and said, "You just to remind you, you used the boys as an illustration." And part of me gets defensive, you know what I mean? Like as a,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
are you trying to say? Why can't you not just say I did a great job preaching or whatever? But anyway,
Yeah.
but it was one of those things that actually we're not just going to do that with our daughter Katie. We're going to do it with all of our kids. And I went,
Yeah.
and it was actually, it almost felt like a holy moment. I went and apologized to my boys and said, I used your story without asking your permission. I know like that's so minor compared to some of the stuff that you're talking
Yeah.
about. But I think it feels like to me it's on that sort of like that similar path.
Vein. Yeah. I always think that when we look at the power imbalance, even like so there's like so will always go back to the power imbalance.
Yes.
So there's a power imbalance between parent and child. There is, and there should be, right, to a point, right? I'm not getting control, but don't show my kids that. So, but there is, right, and the role of the parent here is an interesting piece, right? Because what we then do is actually what we do with our kids is put a hedge of protection around them, right? So, and I'm like, so let's carry this. So when there's a power imbalance, what we do is we protect, and we go, actually, do you know what? You don't need to know this. Why am I exposing this
Yes.
to all of these people? Like I'm protecting this. You know, like I'm not letting all of these people get to you. Like, you know, like I look at that when in relation to my daughter, you know, and internet use and all of that stuff, you know, like I'm the barrier. I'm the stop of going, right, well, hold on. So as organizations, we have got to go, you know, like when we're telling stories, we've got to humble ourselves and go, well, this is not about exposing something so we can create an emotion or get the information out or leverage something so that we get something in return. This is about protection. This is about keeping the story owned by the individual, owned by that person. And so that I think we always will come to this place around three kind of core principles around this. And speaking from an organizational standpoint, is humility, honesty, and transparency. So if we apply these three filters and go, you know, is this are we telling this story out of humility?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, are we telling this story honestly and transparently? You know, then if we're working through those filters, I think we'll naturally change the way we tell stories, and what stories we tell.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah, and I think you had said that this conversation did have wider implications for society. So and I maybe get myself in trouble here, but there's been part of me over the last year over lockdown that I've watched some churches' social media feeds and just been uncomfortable. And so whenever you give some of that stuff around ethical storytelling, I think that's why I felt uncomfortable. It's that power imbalance. It's almost like they're taking control, and it
yeah,
almost feels like they're taking advantage of somebody's story, and it doesn't feel humble. It feels like they're more interested in the stats in how much people that they have fed, and how, and I found myself just being really uncomfortable with that. I found myself really checking myself in that as well. What am I more focused on? I'm more focused on how much we've given away, or am I more focused on the people? You know what I mean? And so that, and I think
Yeah.
you've touched on it already, Pete. That I still think the church is not good at this. We still reduce individuals to their lack. We still reduce them to the challenges that they still face.
It's good.
And
It's good.
I'm so concerned as a church, like somebody involved in leading church. I'm so concerned by that. You know what I mean? And yeah,
Well, it's interesting that you point to the church thing. Like it's a really interesting. I would probably be in the same boat. I feel like we are. The church is becoming. They look at their social media like a promotional tool. So they've got sucked into advertising
yeah,
and marketing, and no offense to any marketers out there, but it's not the most honest or transparent, industry. Them and estate agents are pretty much the ones who only get paid to lie. Like don't really like a lot of estate agents either. So the only token, if you're an estate agent, you're dead on. Kind of. There's one in East Belfast who isn't, and so, but it's that we're getting sucked in and representative, right? So I look at I've seen some places, that they put out all of this stuff. It's really coolly designed, really youthful, all of that stuff. There's not one person who's over 24 in the imagery, right? You go to the church, and they go to the church, and 75% of these people are are over 25 and have families. Now, what does that do for the people in the room? What does that say to the people in the room? So you're saying one thing to the people online, but you're saying something completely different to the people in the room. So where's the humility? Where's the honesty? And where's the transparency?
yeah,
It feels to me that there's we're sort of we gravitate towards making people heroes, and I suppose that's maybe like
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
marketing thing around that, and that's been, I don't know whether it's watching films and stuff where we go, oh, we identifying with the hero and so on, but even kind of how you talk about a charity saying if you donate, you're going to save this child's life and stuff, making someone feel like the hero rather than going, there's a genuine problem here. We want you to know about it. If you can help, that would be great. Rather than kind of going, yeah, trying to sort of make people feel like heroes. And I think what you're saying there about making people almost selling their story and stuff to give people that hero feel, it is really wrong. It's bizarre when you think about it.
Yeah, and we don't. The thing is, right? The thing is that it's covered by the best intention, right? And it's covered by the guise of doing the right thing. So what you're going is right. Oh, we'll do this because what that does is gets us more money in, and we'll be able to do more programs. We'll be able to employ more staff, do more things, and therefore, like it's risk and reward. Like element of risk, exploit someone a wee bit for their story here, but reward, we can do more stuff with people, right? So, and that playoff, it's just not right. Like it's just not right. Like, so you're better going slow and small and steady and right than you are going fast, quick, and wrong. I like it's just not, and that's the problem with society and church culture and all of that, is that we just want to go quick. We want the stage, we want the recognition, we want the influence, and we want to bypass doing it right.
That's right.
And doing it well with people.
Yeah.
And the posture, and like the post, and I like I've been wrestling with so much of this stuff over the last 2 years. The posture servanthood, nothing else, not influence, not recognition, not your books, not your Instagram feeds, none of that. It's servanthood.
Yeah.
Serve well, serve well. Like, and what does that look like? Like, what does that look like for people? Like, what does that look like for the church? What does that look like when I look at, I zoom in modern slavery and human trafficking, I don't want, I want to stand up and do a TED talk. I don't want to do that. Right. I want to do some stuff that serves people and allows them to exit. So, like that's the thing. And I want to empower people or challenge people or scratch the surface of stuff that uncovers stuff that allows more people to recognize the issue and then therefore bring freedom to other people.
Yeah.
That's it. Just posture and servanthood.
Yeah.
And do that. Because the other thing, you'll get to the end with all of the recognition and I've achieved what? A blue tick on your Instagram. I like that sounds callous, but do you know what I mean? And I'm what?
Yeah.
I'm what?
Yeah.
Like I just, yeah. I'm probably getting too emotionally in that one.
I hear you.
That's not. Yeah, it's not. Yeah.
Pete, we've just thinking about your wee 7-year-old. He want to see his daddy before he goes to bed. So
Now get in the bed. I hope he's in bed already. He's not. He's racking upstairs. I can hear him.
Yeah, I think there's part of me honestly has just been so floored by some of what you've shared, and I find so much of it so helpful and really inspired by what you're doing, and so inspired by your posture. I think that's some of that stuff has been so helpful, Pete, and really grateful for your time. There's probably so much more that we could talk through and scratch at, and maybe we'll do that at another stage.
Yeah, I'd love that.
But there is one question that I always like to finish with, Pete, and I didn't warn you of this. Apologise, but I'm holding out. I'm actually thinking I'm holding out for pretty good recommendations here, Pete. So, what is it that you're reading, watching, or listening to that you would recommend to us and to people listening in tonight?
Oh, right here, my AirPods are about to go, but I'll be down. Oh, I think they're gone, are they?
No, still hear you.
Hold on 2 seconds. Oh no! There we go. Is that us now?
That's it. Yeah.
Sorry.
The big build up to these recommendations, Pete.
Didn't charge my AirPods before it came on. That's terrible. Terrible banter. So what I'm reading, what I've just finished reading, that essentially has probably been the best book I've read about church in a long, long time, is A Church Called Tove by Scott McKnight and Laura.
Oh yes.
Sorry, Laura. I forgot your second name.
Fascinating.
Thank you. So that I think it talks about power imbalances in church and abuses in church and how the church should respond and respond accordingly. So that has been very, very good.
Great.
That's it.
But watching anything?
Oh, watching. I've just started Winter Soldier and Falcon. Quite enjoying that.
Oh, good.
On the old Disney Plus. Not too sure about Disney, but like good content.
Well, they've got us trapped. We can't look away from Disney Plus now.
You said it, not me. Just started watching that. So that's good. And then listening. Did you say listening?
Yeah.
Right. it's not new or anything, right? But am I allowed to say music, or is this like a podcast thing?
Oh, whatever, or just anything.
Whatever.
Well, we know you've been listening to Ordinary People as a
Oh,
podcast,
yeah,
obviously.
all the time. Just followed Twitter today. So, so listening to, right, and this is listening and watch, right. I haven't really touched on this, but I'm a DJ as well, and so this is worth a watch if you're into a wee bit of live kind of electronic music and visual stimulus. Rufus the Soul live at Joshua Tree. Go and watch that. Type that into YouTube.
What are we typing in?
It's about 40 minutes long,
Uh-huh.
and it's great. So yeah, I can't get away from that. I listen to that album all the time.
Okay. Good stuff. Good recommendations, Pete. I was going to start watching Winter or The Falcon Soldier with my boy tomorrow.
Good. It's great.
Appropriate. He's 12. It's appropriate. All right.
Oh
real? Oh no.
I actually don't know. Like yeah, well, I suppose so. I don't know. I sit down with my 7-year-old son and watch all the Star Wars movies. So, there's people getting run through them with lightsabers and stuff. So I have at it.
I was going to give you a couple of
that counselling won't fix later in life.
I was going to give you a couple of examples of what I do let him watch, but in case my mum and dad are listening,
Silence the alarms and all. Kid going to sleep. You're traumatized.
Pete, thank you so much. Honestly, I've really enjoyed. I really enjoyed this chat, and
yeah, it's been loads of fun. Thank you. Well, not fun, but it's been a good chat. Yeah, this is the thing. I'm quite a positive person, and then when you're talking about modern slavery, you can't be really enjoyed training you today while you're talking about all this carnage.
And it was one of those moments where you're talking about taking. Like, am I allowed to laugh here? Is it okay to sort of?
Laugh
at Pete's telling jokes about?
Yeah, Liam Neeson. To be fair, Liam Neeson, he did bring a lot of attention and did do a lot of good stuff out of the back of that film. But obviously, it was dramatized and stigmatized and all for a lovely audience.
Super, Pete. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Ordinary People was hosted by Neil Dawson. It was produced, edited and engineered by Andrew Griven and Paul Woods. Head over to ordinarypodcast.com for show notes, links, previous episodes and all the ways you can contact the show.